Welcome back to Digital Coffee Gaming Brew, the podcast where we brew the rawest news, serve the dirtiest takes, and pull zero shots. I'm your digital barista, Brett Dicer. Grab your favorite mug, adjust your expectations down to the floor level, and settle in because today's roast is so bitter, it might actually strip the enamel right off your teeth. Let's dive in. That's good. Halo Campaign Evolved launched this week and peaked at just about 25,376 players on Steam. That number sits at the lowest opening the whole series has ever posted on the platform. Core fans saw the same pattern of swaps and redesigns that keep showing up in these remakes. You know the drill, but by now. They took the original bridge crew member, the one based on the real Bungie engineer named Matt Segura, and swapped his race and gender. They gave Cortana a new model that drops the proportions and attitude everyone remembers from the first 3 games. Then they added prequel missions where a brand new girl boss lectures the players every 5 minutes about power and attitude. The results prove that Microsoft and Halo Studios turned their back on men who bought every Halo game at midnight, argued over maps for hours, and kept the franchise alive through every console cycle. That's where we're at. The rest of this episode lays out how that choice plays out across the whole industry right now, with the same bad brew getting served up over and over. Let's get on with this show. Halo Campaign Evolved reached a peak of 25,376 players at launch on July 28th, 2026. That figure marks the lowest opening count the series has ever recorded on Steam since the first ports arrived. Halo Infinite hit a peak of 272,568. The Master Chief Collection hit 161,024. Even the original Combat Evolved port inside the collection pulled more players on its own. Reviews currently sit at a 76 positive out of 600 or 6,500 user reviews on Steam. With complaints focused on crashes, login problems that block access to the campaign, and always online Microsoft account check that fails during the smallest outage, the redesign of Cortana drew immediate criticism for longtime players who preferred the original look and personality. The one with the classic proportions and the sharp, confident edge. At the same time, the bridge crew lost the original Bungie developer cameo that Marty O'Donnell confirmed came from a face scan of audio engineer Matt Segura. Videos show female NPCs surviving repeated hits during the Pillar of Autumn missions while male characters fell normally. Now, I will actually admit that it seems to be a little bit of a toss-up on this one. It looks like some people can do it or some people can't. The hitboxes are off, so I'll give the benefit of the doubt for that one. Community testing traced the behavior to a hitbox bug, yet the timing created optics that fed existing complaints about forced changes. The Master Chief Collection still draws large crowds years after its own release, and many reviews recommend it as the cheaper option that avoids the current technical issues. Players keep saying the same thing in the comments. Skip the new one, grab the collection for less money, and actually finish a campaign without the game crashing to desktop. With the numbers on the table, we move straight into the first misstep of messing with established characters. Stop it with the excuses about hardware updates. The old models worked fine on the same engine they used back then. Marty O'Donnell stepped in and confirmed the change himself. The original bridge crew member of the Pillar of Autumn, as we said before, was a Bungie engineer who built the audio engine for the first game. That face scan turned into a different race gender for the remake. The move erased a direct nod to someone who helped shape the sound players still remember from the early days. You can hear the frustration in his voice when he talks about it. They took a real person who worked on the game and replaced him with a version that never existed in the original. That is not an update, that is rewriting the credits while the original team watches from the sidelines. Cortana received the same treatment. Her new model drops the classic proportions and expressions that define the character across the original trilogy. Players who grew up with those cutscenes see the shift as a deliberate rewrite rather than an update for new hardware. The results lands as an attempt to distance the franchise from its own history while claiming the name still carries the same weight. The old Cortana had the mix of sass and intelligence that made the AI feel like a part of the squad. The new one looks like someone tried to soften every edge so it fits a different audience that never showed up in sales data, anyways. Longtime fans label the whole approach brand hijacking. They bought into Halo because the characters and cameos reflected the people who made it. When those elements get swapped out, the connection breaks. The audience that turned the series into a console seller now watches its own references get replaced by versions that never existed in the source material. It does not work. You cannot erase the original vision and expect the same people to keep lining up at midnight or pre ordering it, really, because who lines up at midnight anymore? These alterations land on the same group that made Halo matter. The men who lined up for midnight launches and argued over multiplayer maps built the sales numbers that kept the franchise alive. Once the core symbols changed, that group stops seeing itself in the product. They do not hate the game because it got prettier. They hate it because the game now acts like they were never the target in the first place. The same pattern appears in other major releases. Developers aptly race and gender swap to legacy characters without any corresponding rise in player count. Each case follows the same path of rewriting what already worked and then wondering why the number stays flat. You see it in the comments every time. The same complaints, the same drop in concurrent players, the same recommendations to go back to the older collection instead. After seeing how many characters get rewritten, we pour into the misstep of cramming in girl boss side stories. So let's get on. New prequel missions drop a girl boss lead who lectures the player at every turn. The script hands her lines that stop the action cold and turn every exchange into a lecture about attitude or power. Male players who bought the game for the original tone notice the shift right away and stop caring about the mission that follows. You know the type. She shows up, tells the Master Chief how things really work, pauses the firefight so she can explain why everyone needs to listen, then wonders why the player already has one hand on the quit button. That's not storytelling. That is someone in the writer's room deciding the original audience needed fixing. The core audience tunes out the second the dialogue stops serving the straightforward style that defined the first games. They came back for the same mix of banter and combat that made the series work, not for a new character who pauses the fight to explain why everyone else needs to listen to her. That breaks in the rhythm costs attention fast, and when the rest of the mission still needs to land, the old Halo gave you Sergeant Johnson cracking jokes while the bullets still flew. This new version gives you a character who treats every cutscene like a corporate training video on inclusion. It does not work. The player who paid full price on day one already knew the tone they wanted. They did not need a replacement version that lectures them for liking the old one. The same pattern repeats across prequels and side content in multiple other series. Writers add these moments because they want the story to feel updated. Yet, the change always lands on the same group that already showed up for the classic version. Each new entry follows the same steps and produces the same results, where longtime players move on to something else instead. You see it in every failed launch this year. The girl boss gets added, the original tone gets buried, and this basically serves nobody, and it becomes almost a dead game. Companies keep acting surprised when the numbers tank, like they did not just watch the same thing happen to the last three titles. The end product tastes like a watered down coffee that nobody ordered. The original flavor disappears under the extra ingredients, and the people who kept the brand alive lose interest before they finish the first act. Player count reflects the choice every time these beats appear in the middle of an otherwise familiar campaign. The guys who bought the game for the Master Chief campaign do not suddenly want to sit through 10 minutes of attitude adjustment from a character who never existed in the source material. They came for the fight, they got the lecture instead. Data from the launch numbers show the drop whenever these sections take over the narrative flow. The audience that remembers the older entries simply skips the new content or puts the game down entirely. That reaction repeats across different studios because the same decision keeps getting made for the same reasons. They forgot who their target audience is. They keep chasing some modern crowd that posts online but never shows up in the actual sales data or the concurrent player counts. They do not like you. They wish you were not male. They wish you were whatever version they think you will that will get them praise on social media. That is the real reason the pot stays empty every single time. Once the narrative shift land, we look at the tech side that makes playing feel like a punishment. Moving on to the mess right now. The always online requirement stops single player access the moment login servers fail to respond. Players expect a campaign they can start right away, yet the game demands a constant Microsoft account check that blocks entry during even brief outages. That setup turns a straightforward purchase into an immediate barrier on launch day. Crashes and frame pacing issues struck every major platform from the first hours. Unreal Engine 5's stability problems triggered random desktop shutdowns on PC, while console versions showed stuttering during cutscenes and inconsistent aiming in combat. These technical faults appeared across different hardware setups, and troubleshooting guides spread through forums as players searched for workarounds. Reviewers and players quickly pointed to the cheaper Master Chief Collection as the better option. The older bundle runs the original campaign without the new login walls or day one instability, and it still draws higher concurrent numbers years after release. Many Steam comments now recommend skipping the remake entirely in favor of the collection that costs less and functions without the extra hurdles. These problems compound when the story already pushed fans away. The technical layer adds frustration on top of the characters' swaps and prequel section that broke the original tone. So, the combined effect drives more players towards older titles they already know work. The launch ends up feeling like a bad espresso that never settles because each new issue reinforces the last one. Data from SteamDB showed that 25,000 peak concurrent count on day one. That number stayed low as the bugs persisted through the first week. Players who cleared the login steps still reported hitching and crashes that cut sessions short, which kept the overall engagement flat compared to prior Halo releases on the same platform. Publishers chase a modern audience that rarely shows up in real purchase data or sustained play sessions. They direct marketing and design choices towards groups that post online but deliver minimal sales when the product arrives. The original male players who made the franchise like Halo into a major hits get left out of the equation entirely. These companies forget who their target audience is. They keep trying to find some modern crowd that posts the right things but never actually buys the game or sticks around after week one. That is the same thing every time. They do not like you. They wish you were not male. And they wish you were whatever version they think will get them the right kind of attention. And it still is worth repeating. So we drive this home. They act as if those men never existed in the first place. Every decision flows from a place that treats the core buyers as an outdated element rather than the reason the series reached millions of copies sold across earlier entries. The focus moves to voices that demand changes without bringing the same volume of support. You see in every interview where they talk about updating the franchise for new players. They never mention the players who already bought every game and kept the servers full for years. Those guys just get treated like the problem that needs solving. Each redesign and side story carries the same message that the old fans created the current problems. Writers and directors insert elements that clash with the established tone because they view the original audience as something that holds the brand back. That message comes across clearly when characters and stories shift away from what drew the first wave of players. The Girl Boss lectures that swapped cameos and the redesign that removed every trace of the original team, it all adds up to the same thing. The people who paid for the games get told they are the reason the franchise needs fixing. This approach turns the most consistent buyers into the enemy instead of the foundation. Loyal customers who return for every release now find themselves positioned as the obstacle that needs removal through new narratives and visual updates. The companies lose the base that provides steady revenue while chasing approval for people who rarely complete purchases. You cannot build a business by replacing your best customers with who only show up to complain on social media and then disappear when the game actually launches. Sales drops across Halo Infinite and similar titles prove the pattern holds no upside. Engagement fell when the same choices about character presentation, story focus, repeated in updates and expansions. Concrete figures show lower retention once players realize the direction no longer matches their expectation. The same thing happened with every other title that tried this route. The core audience left, the new audience never arrived in numbers that mattered, and the servers went quiet. The wish to replace the core crowd keeps delivering the same flat results every time it gets tried. Companies cycle through the same steps, then express surprise when overall numbers fail to recover. That repeated attempt leaves the original audience behind while the hope for replacement never arrives in enough strength to offset the loss. They keep serving the wrong crowd and act surprised when the pot stays empty. While the audience mismatch clear, we check on how the same errors play out in other recent titles. Marathon ran into the same wall. Bungie pushed heavy redesigns on the core look and tone, and the backlash forced them to cancel the project before it reached full release. The team had spent years building hype around a fresh take. Yet the changes stripped away what longtime players expected from the studio that once defined Halo. The same pattern showed up in character models, the story direction, and the way the game tried to distance itself from everything that made Destiny and the original Marathon games work. Players saw the writing on the wall and stayed away. The project died or is on life support before it ever reached the market it claimed to want. Call of Duty keeps stacking extra layers that push longtime fans aside. New modes, story beats, focus on themes that clash with the straightforward action loops that sold millions of copies each year. Players who logged in for the competitive edge now see content that lectures instead of delivers kills and maps. And I would say weird skins that don't match what Call of Duty is. The multiplayer still brings in money, but the campaign and the seasonal stories keep drifting further from the tone that made this series a yearly purchase for an entire generation. You see the same companies every season. The old audience shows up for the guns and the maps and then leaves when the story decides to lecture instead. Assassin's Creed Shadows and Star Wars Outlaw followed this exact swap and girl boss route. Both titles introduced lead characters and side plots that rewrote established rules for the sake of newer angles. Sales and engagement dropped once the core audience realized the story no longer served the original fantasy of stealth and rebellion. Shadows tried to change the historical setting and the lead character dynamic. Outlaws gave players a protagonist who felt more like a corporate checklist than an outlaw with a real personality. I'll bet mind you, for Star Wars Outlaws, it looked like a guy and a girl meshed together to make the protagonist, which looked weird. And then having a black dude as one of the main characters was weird in Japan. So they just made a bunch of missteps, both of them, or Ubisoft in general. Both games watched their player counts fall after the first week because the audience that made the series work no longer saw themselves in the product. They also killed Star Wars Outlaws sequel because it just wasn't a good game. Concord collapsed within weeks. The hero shooter arrived with a cast that offered no anchor for the players who had supported similar games for years. No original audience showed up because the recipe ignored every element that made the genre popular in the first place. The characters felt like they came from a focus group that never played a hero shooter. The gameplay did not deliver the loop that kept people coming back to older hero shooters. The game died fast because nothing about it respected the audience that already existed. Each of these cases revealed the same refusal to brew for the men who made the brands big. Studios chase approval from voices that never bought the prior entries in volume. The result leaves empty servers and canceled projects while the paying base moves on to older titles that still respect the formula. You see the same story every time. The core audience gets told they are the problem, the changes get made anyway, and the numbers prove the audience was right all along. The example leads into the wider industry habit that keeps repeating. Western developers favor brand hijacking over creating fresh IPs from scratch. They take an established name and rewrite the characters and stories that built its reputation over decades. This route avoids the work of introducing something new to a certain market. It also guarantees friction with the buyers who already paid for earlier versions. Historical film flops show the same swaps kill interest fast when studios alter legacy heroes without regard for the original audience. Box office numbers drop sharply once viewers realize the replacement changed the core appeal that drew them in the first place. Game studios repeat the process and receive identical pushback through lower sales and empty servers. Original characters get replaced while new stories ignore the paying base that funded their prior entries. Writers insert different versions and expect the same loyalty to follow. The connection breaks because the paying players no longer recognize the product as the one they supported through multiple releases. Concrete player data from every recent release keeps telling the same story of flat engagement after the first weekend. Publishers end up wondering why numbers stay so low once the initial marketing push fades. They review the reports and still apply the same changes to the next project. The figures from concurrent counts and review scores repeat across studios because the decision followed the same pattern. They keep serving the wrong crowd and act surprised when the pot stays empty. Big shocker. The original players are just gone. They just don't want to do this anymore. It's the same thing every single time. Even marketing specific things, you always know to keep your returning customers happy, and you always try to get new customers, but it costs way more money to get new customers than to keep your returning customers happy. But every single time a new project comes out, they keep doing this thinking it will bring about even more profits. It doesn't work. It has never worked. So publishers treat their original male audience as the obsolete obstacle they must remove. They keep trying to replace the guys who bought every game with some version of an audience that only exists in their marketing meetings. It does not work. The numbers keep proving it. Drop your take in the comments on which title burned you the worst and subscribe for the next roast. We will keep calling it out every time they serve the same bad brew.